Good morning, everyone. We are live now.
Namaste, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all, as per the location where you are at present. I am Nivedita Pathak, coordinator and MC for the session. Before we begin, I would like to highlight a few hygiene instructions for ensuring a smooth running of this session. Let me share my screen. If you have any questions for the speakers, please type them in the Q&A tab. If any of the questions from the audience are left unanswered due to lack of time, we will send the same to the speakers via email and respond back to you. You may interact with the fellow attendees live using the chat tab during the session. If you want to enlarge your presentation, please click the expanding arrow icon on the top right of the presentation screen as shown below. The tool is configured for HD. The attendees may switch to a lower mode in case you are facing bandwidth problems. It is now my pleasure to introduce you to the co-chairs of this session, Mr. Prashant Chugh and Professor Brijesh Lal. Prashant Chugh is currently working as a group leader in CDOT, a telecom technology center under Government of India. Prashant has more than 25 years of work experience in telecommunications R&D. He is currently leading a group in CDOT that is working in development of post-quantum cryptography based encryption products. Next, I would like to introduce Professor Brijesh Lal. Professor Brijesh Lal is presently Professor of Electrical Engineering Department and earlier served as the head of Bharati School of Telecom Technology and Management at IIT Delhi. He is also the in charge of an IoT laboratory that he has set up in collaboration with Samsung. He has mentored over 5 startups in the area of virtualization, geofencing, UAV based solutions, and recommendations and data mining. Over to you, Prashant sir.
Very warm welcome to all the participants. I hope I am audible clearly.
Yes.
Yeah. So let me just brief you about the agenda today. So we have two keynote talks today. One is on quantum safe cryptography for information technology services. That is by Matthew Campana, who is from Amazon Web Services and is currently chair of ETSI Quantum Safe Cryptography Working Group. Followed by it, we have another keynote talk, which is on quantum machine learning. That is by Stephen Aurelien Kovac. And he is the founder and CEO of QR Crypto, which is a company based in Switzerland. And after these two keynote talks, we'll be having a panel discussion where the topic of the panel discussion is quantum technologies, a boon or a bane for future telecom networks. And we have an excellent list of panelists where Dr. Anindita Banerjee is there. And she has worked in CUNO Labs and now she's in CDAC. And we have Professor Brijesh Lal from IIT Delhi. And then we have Dr. Manjunath Ayer from Wipro and Professor Monica Agarwal from CARE IIT Delhi and Ms. Reena Dayal from Quantum Ecosystem and Technology Council of India. So, audience, as has been mentioned by Nivedita, at any moment of time, your questions you can put in the question answers tab. Now, the subject of quantum technologies is a very important subject, and a lot of need is there to create more awareness on this topic in India. So, day before yesterday, there was another session in TSBSI where these quantum technology aspects were discussed. Now, this today's session is totally focused on this quantum session, and this awareness is very important in the Indian ecosystem because the subject is gaining more and more importance. Now, these quantum technologies basically consist of a number of subdomains such as quantum computing, then quantum sensing, then quantum materials, quantum metrology, and so on. So the subject is very vast. So in today's session and the keynotes and the panel discussion, we are focusing on mainly two areas. One is the impact on the cryptography, and the second is the use of quantum machine learning and impact of the same on the telecom systems. So I hope these will lead to more discussions on the importance of this topic. Now, this quantum cryptography again consists of other sub areas like quantum key distribution and post quantum cryptography. And the primary objective of the session is to create more awareness on this topic in India and this part of the world. And because most countries across many developed economies specifically have put a lot of focus on quantum infrastructure, and some countries even consider this as to be one of the most important projects of the nation, because there it is strategically very important. Now, this is very important that these projects in India are also put at high priority, because the security experts say that if sufficient measures are not taken now, then a crypto apocalypse type situation may take place in future. Something like there was Y2K problem, now they say Y2Q, it is year to quantum. And then the years we don't know, because a lot of advancements are happening. And when suddenly some these advancements are there which can break the cryptography. So a lot of this thing is required, emphasis is to be required here. And we have tried to keep the discussion of today's topic very simple. There are no hard maths or no like strong physics concepts which are basically used in the solutions of the quantum technologies. They are proposed. So the discussion is very simple and trying to keep more awareness. Now I would like to introduce the first speaker, uh, Matthew Compena. He is a senior principal engineer and cryptographer from Amazon Web Services. He oversees the design and analysis of cryptographic solutions across Amazon Web Services. He is a member of Etsy Security Algorithms Group, and is also currently chairman of Etsy Cyber Quantum Safe Cryptography Group. So in 2019, actually, Amazon hosted an international conference on quantum safe cryptography. This is by conference was by Etsy and IQC, and there, in fact, from C. side, I had also gone there, and we had made our presentation on our work, and there I met Matthew. So I am very thankful to Matthew for having accepted our invitation and joined here. So over to you, Matthew. And now, since because of so that there should be no technical glitches, we have a pre-recorded video of Matthew. Though Matthew will be present during the session, and he will be taking up the questions after his presentation. So can you please, Asif, start his video?
I am Matt Compagnon from Amazon Web Services, member of the Etsy Security Algorithm Group Experts, or SAGE, and the chair of Etsy's Technical Committee on Quantum Safe Cryptography, a cyber working group. I'll be talking about the impact of quantum computing on aspects of the telecommunication networks today. So when we engineer with cryptography, we start with security requirements like confidentiality, the property that data is not disclosed to unauthorized entities. Other such security properties like data integrity, message authentication, and non-repudiation are critical to many applications. But I'm primarily concerned about confidentiality today. So these security services are instantiated by cryptographic functions like encryption and key agreement for confidential communication. And these in turn are provided by cryptographic algorithms like the Advanced Encryption Standard or the Elliptic Curve Diffie-Hellman scheme. So we select algorithms based on how long we needed to deliver a security property. So for something like confidentiality, where we might need it to protect data for 10 years. And if we think it'll take another 5 years to update and deprecate old deployments, then I really need the algorithm to be secure for 15 years, where secure is admittedly not fully defined. And I'll try to address that on the following slide. We also want these algorithms to be universally accepted by our customers. We want to be able to use hardened implementations in common software or hardware. And finally, we need it to meet our performance needs. And there's a lot of tension between performance and security. So what do we mean by secure? There are two aspects here. One is the computational complexity of the best known attack. And this is a number or formula based on the algorithm parameters. We can estimate how long it will take to collect the necessary data and execute this attack. And this gives us an algorithm's maximum lifetime. Next, we want to have a sense of how sure am I that a better attack is not coming? Within the lifetime, the security property is needed. And this is less numerical. It is developed through the cycle of design, analysis, and sharing, spawning new design and analysis that gets us to a position of confidence that the next best attack will take a significant amount of time before it's discovered. Think of this as exponential backoff when it comes to the next best known attack. It's usually not never. And it takes on average 10 to 20 years to develop this assurance, and another 5 to 10 years for ubiquitous deployment. So we use these widely accepted algorithms to define cryptographic protocols for securing data in transit and in rest. One of the things that keeps me awake is the long-term security requirements for confidentiality to our customers. Today, most of our customers connect to the AWS cloud over the public internet. We assume data over public networks are being recorded. So we select cryptographic algorithms in our protocols that have the security lifetime that exceeds the confidentiality requirement. But if at some point in the future, a new capability is discovered or becomes available, all this recorded traffic is potentially vulnerable to decryption and disclosure. One such capability is quantum computing. Two quantum algorithms in particular introduce new best known attacks against the classical crypto systems we use today. And this is not news. There's Shor's algorithm, which solves both the discrete log and integer factorization, breaking RSA, finite field, and elliptic curve cryptography. And there's Grover's algorithm, which can search an unsorted list of n items in a square root of time. And this reduces by a square root the security of the symmetric schemes. So if we look at the standards that we're using today, we realize they need to be updated. And this slide depicts the NIST-based specifications, which are defined in other international standards as well. For the symmetric key schemes, at the 128-bit security, we can just transition to a larger key size, like 256 bits, and retain 256 bits against a classical adversary and 128-bit security against a potential quantum adversary. For asymmetric schemes, the methods we use for signature and key establishment, the workhorse algorithms of authenticated key agreement over untrusted networks, are functionally broken and need to be replaced. So we know it'll take a long time to develop and deploy new secure algorithms, and we know we need to provide confidentiality for a long time. The real question becomes, do we have enough time to replace them? How fast should we move? And how does this apply to the telecommunication standards today? This slide depicts a timeline of quantum computing development, the past on the left-hand side with opaque dots and a potential future on the right by these translucent shapes. Quantum computing, initially discovered by Feynman and others, was pretty esoteric until the development of Shor's and Grover's algorithm, at least in the world of cryptography. Since then, there's been slow progress in building a scalable quantum computer. There's serious physics research required to solve issues around placing a large array of interconnected qubits in a superposition state for an extended period of time over which to compute. But there does seem to be an increase in the rate of advancements and investment in quantum computing. So we can speculate when a quantum computer of sufficient size might attack something like RSA 2048 with small and minuscule probability in 5 years, but growing over time. And we can zoom in on this and consider a potential future under our existing store and harvest threat model to confidentiality. We consider the type of data and the duration for which we need for it to stay confidential. For temporary security credentials, this might be short-lived, minutes to days. Earning reports for public companies, maybe months. Credit card information, 5 to 8 years. Still within a time frame, we can be reasonably certain no such quantum computer exists. But when we start to think about shopping habits or corporate trade secrets, we're out 10 to 20 years. And classified information or sealed records, we're out maybe 30 plus years. Here, the risk of a large-scale quantum computer rises to the point where we want to augment the security protections provided by our existing key agreement schemes. Looking further out, like genomic data, we might want to consider this secure, confidential for multiple lifetimes, which is beyond what we can reliably reason about when it comes to future advancements in cryptanalysis. But we can select the algorithms today based on the lifetime against best known attacks under some model of computational improvement, like Moore's law, and we typically do. So what does this mean for 5G? Well, there are two network segments that are fundamental to 5G: the cellular connection between the user equipment and the serving network, and the connection between the serving network and the home environment. An authenticated key agreement occurs between the user equipment, the serving network, and the home environment using a scheme called millinage. The home environment authentication center and the user equipment share a secret key, K. When the user equipment tries to connect, it sends its concealed subscriber ID, which has enough information to be routed to the home environment. The authentication center receives this and can decrypt the concealed subscriber ID to get the permanent ID and look up a sequence number and this shared key K. Using that and some other carrier-specific values, it computes a random challenge, an authentication token, and the hash of an expected response to that challenge. The serving network forwards the random challenge and the authentication to the user equipment. The device validates the authentication token and on success computes a response value. The serving network validates that response value by hashing it and comparing it to the hash of the expected response. On success, it forwards the response back to the home environment, which will respond with the security anchor key, function key, and a permanent subscriber ID. This allows the serving network to compute the same set of keys the device can, and in particular, the user plane and command and control key sets. The customer can now transmit data back and forth using the user plane keys. So there are two networks here, one completely secured by the symmetric key operations at the 128-bit security level, and one secured by public key protocols, but both need to be updated. So if we take a deeper look at the 5G specifications, or security specifications, we can see a trend that's not too uncommon, and that's a complex mapping of standards. In the mapping, I've highlighted the specifications in orange that have cryptographic components used by 5G that are not at the 128-bit quantum security level. This is by no means a complete graph, and the graph can be extended further. So it'll take some time to revise these standards to get the quantum-safe versions of these specifications. So Ieee has been working in post-quantum crypto. It started back in 2013, along with the University of Waterloo's Institute for Quantum Computing, to establish the Quantum Safe Cryptography Workshop. Knowing it would take at least a decade, its motivation was attracting the attention to start of international standards organizations and government entities to start this standardization work. In 2014, the workshop produced a white paper that highlighted the impact of quantum computing to our information technology systems, proposed interim solutions, and a path for standardization. Ieee started the Quantum Safe Crypto Industry Specification Group in 2015, which moved to a technical committee in 2018, capable of producing normative standards. Also in 2018, SAGE, in response to a liaison statement from 3GPP SA3, the Security Area Working Group, started the work on a 256-bit cryptographic algorithms for communication, multiple algorithms, and a 256-bit version of millinage, the authenticated key agreement. During this time, NIST, the National Institute for Standards and Technology, NIST in the US, made a call for new post-quantum algorithms. NIST is one of the few organizations that can corral the attention of the open community of cryptographers to participate in the design and analysis cycle to arrive at new high-assurance cryptographic algorithms. They've proven this with their AES and SHA competitions and are currently running the post-quantum crypto standardization process. They started back in 2016 and have gone through multiple rounds. They're currently in round 3, which consists of 4 finalist key encapsulation mechanisms, or KEMs, and 5 alternate KEMs. So a KEM is a method of establishing a shared secret among 2 parties, a public key-based key establishment method. At the third PQC conference this past summer, NIST indicated that they are likely to select one or more of the finalist chems for standardization around the end of the year, announce candidates that will advance to round 4, and have draft specifications for comments in 2022, 2023, and final standards around 2024. But we don't need to wait to start upgrading our standards, our other standards. This work can be done in parallel. We can begin to build these proposed schemes into our protocols today to understand how these protocols will need to be extended or our networks reconfigured. Our proposal has been, as we gain assurance in these new post-quantum schemes, to execute a hybrid key exchange. The first key exchange, without adding additional messages to the protocols, we want to do 2 key exchanges. The first key exchange, represented by pink cans, are executing elliptic curve Diffie-Hellman. The second one, by a safe, is executing a post-quantum chem. So Alice initiates this by generating a post-quantum chem key pair, SK and PK, the public key being the safe, and takes a public value G and mixes into it a secret color D to get a new color, DG, green. And Alice will send this open safe public key and this DG can of paint over to Bob. Bob also starts with the public key G and mixes in a secret color K and starts the encapsulation algorithm to get a shared secret SS, which gets sealed to the ciphertext. And now Bob can send both this new color KG and the locked ciphertext over to Alice. Alice, knowing the combination, the secret key, can open the ciphertext to get the same shared secret that Bob has. And both Alice and Bob can add their secret color to their exchange cans of paint to arrive at a new secret color, DKG. Alice and Bob can concatenate these 2 secrets, or really mix them using a key derivation function to arrive at a new secret to encrypt their communication channel. And any onlooker, Eve, does not learn any of the secret values from observing the exchanged public values. And this protocol flow is designed to be as secure as the strongest of the 2 schemes. So if our high assurance elliptic curve Diffie-Hellman scheme fails or falls to some future large-scale quantum computer, we retain the confidentiality of the channel provided by the post-quantum chem. So an adversary would need to break both of these schemes to break the key agreement protocol. So in the center of this graph is the NIST post-quantum standardization process. And one key technology is hybrid key agreement, which allows us to securely work in parallel to not just specify post-quantum solutions, but to deploy them, to understand their impact without degrading the security of the technology we're using today. So the gray boxes represents areas that are actively being specified, and the green end nodes are actual implementations in use. The black dotted lines represent areas that I'm just not tracking or I haven't seen much in the way of deployment or development. A couple of highlights here is there's an ETSI quantum safe hybrid key establishment specification, TS 103744, which captures in a more generic form a PQ hybrid scheme that's similar to what's being standardized or specified within TLS and Ieee. So AWS has deployed post-quantum hybrid today in TLS in our commercial regions for our most security sensitive services, namely AWS's key management service. So what does this mean for 5G? Some of the standards in this graph are being updated now, in particular, the boxes in gray. The work within SAGE to get to 256 communication security and the 256-bit authenticated key agreement millinage is already underway. Many of the IETF protocols are being updated, including TLS, IPsec, and Ieee, to accommodate hybrid key establishment. Other portions of this map will require additional work. These are represented by the black dashed blocks. We will need to update some of the TS technical specifications within 3GPP to point to these new post-quantum schemes. A few places within the IETF that will also require updating or new specifications. And some of this work is already done. Largely the symmetric primitives or frameworks are already done. In particular, FIPS 197 for the advanced encryption standard and HMAC with SHA-256 or larger. So there's a lot of work to be done, and there are places that you can follow along in this process or participate. For the evolution or advancement of the actual post-quantum standards, the NIST mailing list is probably the easiest way to stay up to date. The Telecommunication Standards Development Society of India, as members of 3GPP, can participate in all those working groups, including SA3, where a lot of the security work is being done. There's ETSI's TC Cyber Technical Committee on Quantum Safe Cryptography that's open to all ETSI members, can be accessed through the ETSI portal. And the IETF and their various working group is open to all individual participants. And if you want to track what AWS is doing, I invite you to check out our security blog, where we post the development of our post-quantum solutions at AWS. So thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you. And I'm happy to take questions during the questions section.
Yeah, thanks, Matthew, for bringing about the importance of quantum safe cryptography for future telecom networks, especially with respect to the 5G and the future networks, where a lot of more sensitive information will be carried over the networks as IoT and industrial IoT systems will also get integrated. And also the importance of hybrid key exchange and the ETSI work which you have pointed out. Thank you very much. So we'll just see the audience questions. So in the question answers tab, I see there is a question by Srinivasan Ramakrishnan from IISC Private Limited. And he says, can you make some comments on the performance and the test setup for measuring the same? I think is asking about the hybrid key exchange, if I'm not wrong, or the general, probably the post-quantum key exchange. So would you like to please brief about these points?
Sure. There's a pretty wide variety of the post-quantum chems in terms of CPU usage and bandwidth. And I usually present a slide that has like a logarithmic scale of the differences. But the most promising schemes for standardization are the structured lattice, which add, a couple of thousands of bytes to the bandwidth between like the client and server. So for that public key and the ciphertext going back and forth. But the CPU usage is very efficient, because it's using the structured lattice allows you to use, very small sort of operations that are very efficient on a regular processor today. So they're as fast as elliptic curve Diffie-Hellman schemes today. So they add about 2,000 bytes to the handshake, and we're finding that to a TLS handshake, they're adding about 0.3 milliseconds to a hybrid handshake. So very reliable in terms of the cloud services environment.
Yeah, thank you. So hope, Mr. Srinivasan, you could get a reply to your question. If you have any follow-up questions, you may please write in the Q&A tab. Meanwhile, Matthew, since there are no more questions in the Q&A tab, so I just had a query that was about whether test labs are being set up or being planned to set up by some body, or discussions are happening to test or certify the quantum safe products. Because I feel that that is a challenge, and sometimes there are like marketing claims that the product is meeting these quantum safe things, and we need proper test setup labs actually. So if you can, because you are discussion with various standard groups, so is this discussion on the test setup labs happening somewhere in somewhere around that?
I think it's a little early for the labs to get set up. I mean, I think once NIST will select one or more of these schemes for standardization at the end of the year, and I think it'll take another year or two for that standard to be completed. Once that's completed, I think you can expect to see, at least within the U.S., something similar to the Federal Information Processing Standard, FIPS, implementation guidelines for certification. So like a FIPS 140 certification for compliance to this standard. And similarly, I would expect, within the international space, something like a common criteria or other certification labs related to, compliance to an international standards.
Okay, fine. Thank you. And I see some more questions in Q&A tab. So one question is by Uttara Savant. And the question is, can you help understand the effectiveness of quantum safe encryption with respect to blockchain?
Yeah, today, the blockchain is sort of, the fundamental aspects are a hash base. So those aspects remain relatively secure against a quantum adversary. But when it comes to things like Bitcoin and the use of a wallet, you're using the elliptic curve digital signature algorithm to sign the transactions. And you're using a key derivation function, I think it's called BIP32, to sort of provide you some anonymity in collecting the transactions to you. Both of those are susceptible to sort of a quantum adversarial attack. It's a little bit of a ticking. You have a window of time in which you can sort of move all those transactions to a new digital signature scheme, but you will always be a little bit vulnerable to the anonymity of those old transactions that are using the BIP32. So as long as you have a plan to migrate your existing Bitcoins to let's call them a PQ Bitcoin, prior to the appearance of a quantum computer, I think you can, relatively securely transition that, but you will always be lose that anonymity aspect of those old transactions.
Thank you. I see another question from Mr. Ganesh. And his question is, for the post-quantum safe decryption, what is the number of qubits assumed? Will it be safe for larger number of qubits, which is not available today? I think he's asking about how many qubits will be sufficient for breaking the cryptography. That's what I understood.
Yeah, and I wish I was more expert in that space to say, like, the general idea is that these new post-quantum algorithms are going to be exponential in the amount of sort of computational transactions that you have to do, regardless of how many qubits you have. Will that be true? I think, I still kind of get the feeling we're in our infancy in understanding of quantum algorithms. I didn't study, I studied algorithms, but I didn't study quantum algorithms. When I interview students coming out of the education system, they're largely studying classical algorithms. So I think, we're in our infancy on what a quantum algorithm can do. But to the best of my knowledge, I believe all the quantum algorithms are still exponential in the amount of computation required, regardless of how many qubits.
Okay, thank you very much. Just let me check if there are any more unanswered questions. I don't see. Yeah. So thank you. So in the interest of time, if there are any further questions, please do write to the organizers and we'll take the questions offline with Matthew. Yeah, thank you, Matthew, a lot please.
Thank you to the organizing committee and program committee for an opportunity to speak.
Yeah. Thank you very much for your time, and patiently you answered all the questions. Thank you very much. Now, dear audience, as per plan, our next keynote talk is by Mr. Stipend, but we are told that he's facing some technical challenges in joining, and so I think he has not been able to join, and he's still trying to join. And since we do not have his pre-recorded presentation, and because he told he will be present live, instead of spending some more time here, I suggest we will move to the panel discussion first, and then we'll have Stipends talk after that. So, is that okay, TSDSI folks, or has Stipend joined now, or shall we move to the panel discussion? So, I think we'll now move to the panel discussion. Yeah. So we have an excellent panel, and where we have various panelists working in various academic institutions and companies in India on quantum aspects. And can you please display the slide showing the biodatas? So first we have Dr. Anindita Banerjee, who's currently adjunct scientist in CDAC R&D. So before that, she was in CUNU Labs, and she was a visiting scholar in University of Calgary, and later of University of Brunswick, Canada. And she has published more than 20 journal publications, and she has been instrumental in development of QKD systems. So thank you, Dr. Anandita, for joining. So the next panelist in the list is Dr. Manjunath Ayer. So Dr. Manjunath Ayer is from Wipro Limited and is working in the CTO office there as a consultant. He's filed about 90 patents and a number of tutorials and keynote talks and research papers, and has published a book. And he's a key member of the TDLS task force of Wi-Fi, and he has been also involved with Department of Telecommunications, and he figures in Marquis Who's Who as well. And he is very active in the quantum area, and he has very recently given talks on quantum homomorphic encryption for 5G in IEEE 5G World Forum, then quantum computing for 5G networks at IEEE 5G World Forum, and also quantum computing for content security over the cloud. Thank you, Dr. Manjunath, for joining. So we'll move to the next panelist. So Professor Monica is joining from CARE, that is Center for Applied Research in Electronics from IIT Delhi. And she has worked in 5G IoT and 5G narrowband IoT, and she has developed various AQI systems, and she has got several awards. And she's also working with some quantum startups. So we'll move to the next panelist. So Madam Reena Dayal is from Quantum Ecosystems and Technology Council of India, and she's a technology leader and innovation management expert and founding chairman of Quantum Ecosystems Technology Council of India, and CEO and partner for Benzettin Advisors. And she's also on the steering committee of IEEE Quantum Initiative and chair for IEEE Quantum Special Interest Group in India, and also on the consultative committee for quantum for the government of Telangana. She's also on the governing board and executive committee of CCICI. So thanks, Madam Reena, for joining. Your experience in the quantum area will definitely be very useful in this panel. Then our next panelist is Professor Brijesh Lal, who is also my co-chair. So he's has been introduced earlier. He's professor in electrical engineering department and has served as head of Bharati School of Telecom Technology and Management, IIT Delhi. So I'm privileged to moderate this panel discussion with some of very distinguished panelists who are working in this area. So So the topic of this panel discussion is quantum technologies, a boon or a bane for future telecom networks. Now, why do we say a boon or a bane for future telecom networks? So, in fact, we took some time to just choose this topic because since the time when we started working in this quantum area, at least we in CDOT or in many of you, so we have been hearing about how these quantum computers and advancement in quantum algorithms will can cause an apocalypse in cryptography and all. So we are a lot aware about that aspects, and we are taking the precautions in terms of quantum safe cryptography, development of those systems. But there is another aspect of the quantum technologies which we somehow miss. That is, in the machine learning area, what are the advantages these quantum technologies are going to bring actually? Now, as we know that machine learning is currently being used in the current telecom networks, and also it is being planned to used extensively in future telecom networks for various kinds of things like service provisioning, orchestration, network optimization, anomaly detection, etc. So when these quantum computers are sufficient there, and then the quantum machine learning subject is explored more, then lots of advantages we'll get in the machine learning area with the help of these quantum technologies. So the topic of the panel discussion has been chosen to discuss both aspects of the quantum technologies, that is the impact of both the aspects of quantum technologies on the telecom networks. One is on the cryptography aspects and the other on the machine learning aspects. So with that, I will just, we'll have a few rounds of discussion and questions with my fellow panelists who are subject matter experts in this area. So the first question where I see to start with this panel discussion is, right, and the subject that many experts worldwide believe, many like security experts, they say that the advancements in quantum technologies shall be a bane for future telecom networks because the security of information flowing over the networks shall come under increasing threats. And we'd like to discuss on that what are the views of the other panelists, whether there is a consensus on that or what are the views. So let me just redirect this question to Dr. Anandita first, who is a subject matter expert in the quantum areas, and she has worked on QKD systems. So Dr. Anandita, your expert views on this question, please.
First, thank you, Mr. Prashantju, for this kind introduction and for inviting me. So, coming to this question, if you talk about quantum technology, which is quantum information science, it is nothing but a marriage of quantum mechanics and information theory. Now, there are certain principles in quantum mechanics which can be leveraged for code breaking, and that is the reason we are saying it's a bane. But if you look into the history of cryptography, as and when emerging technologies, the technology evolved, the cryptography also evolved. So whether we should say it a bane or we should say it evolution, we'll come to that. But let us see, why do we see it as a concern? So concern, there are 4 points. One is because there are certain quantum algorithms which can reduce the complexity of some mathematical problems on which the present cryptography is based. That is concern number 1. Concern 2 is the penetration of those classical primitives of classical algorithms in the network security. For example, VPN, secure web browser, certificates issued by the certifying authority, secure software distribution, everything you can say relies upon these primitives or mathematical problems, which is a concern because there are algorithms and there will be more algorithms to come, which will be a challenge to these mathematical problems. Third is, we are in the age of second quantum revolution. Second quantum revolution means that we are using engineering to the quantum system to perform certain tasks. So we are in that level. And the final point is, there are tech giants, there are nations who wants to build the crypto cracking quantum machine. That quantum machine can be simulated annealing, or it can be an optical processor, or it can be superconducting qubits, it can be an ion trap. But the basic thing is, the race is on. So these are the concerns. Now, when I'm talking about these quantum algorithms, just a one line I will say how it functions is, it uses the principles of quantum interference to find the periodicity. And this gives you an advantage that the problem can be solved in polynomial time or a reasonable time rather than exponential time. Now, let us come to Boon part of it. The same principles of quantum mechanics can be leveraged to solve the problems which are posed by the quantum computing, the growth in quantum computing. And one such savior is quantum key distribution, and the other is quantum resistant classical algorithms, which is post-quantum cryptography. So when we talk about quantum key distribution, we are talking about those encryption keys which are resistant to quantum attacks, which are, the randomness is certified by quantum processes, which the keys which cannot be copied. We know earlier we used to do symmetric cryptography. We used to send the key across. If I want to communicate a coded message with you, I will encode the message with some encryption algorithm, which will need encryption keys, and the keys has to be transferred to the other party for them to decrypt it and understand. This problem is not solvable in the present scenario. We do it with the trusted couriers, or which can be human, or it can be device, but it is not probably secure. But in quantum mechanics, it is probably secure to generate symmetric keys across two parties which are separated from say 50 kilometer, 100 kilometer, and there are different ways of doing this communication. So we are evolving, so we are growing. The cryptography is growing and becoming future proof against the quantum adversary. So I think it is both a boon and a bane, or you want to call it a challenge to evolve. I leave it to the audience.
Yeah, fine. Thank you, Dr. Anandita, for describing your views and specifically the evolution of cryptography, as you mentioned. That is very important, and how this cryptography is evolving from one generation to the other to the new challenges. Thank you very much. So, any other panelists? Specifically, I would request Ms. Reena. You have been working in Quantum Ecosystems Council. So, can you please share your views on the same thing?
Yeah, sure. I think Anandita pretty much covered both the aspects, but let me just give my viewpoint. I think today, if you look at the transfer of data on the network, as the networks exist today, it is, you can theoretically and practically tap the network. So the network by itself, the channel is insecure, the physical channel, it can be tapped. The reason why we have network security is because of the fact that the data is encrypted. There are algorithms that are implemented at various parts of the network which keep the network secure, right? And we rely on the strength of the encryption at various levels in the network, as well as for the data in flight, to keep our data secure and our systems secure. Now, if we look at this aspect, and we understand that cryptography is an evolutionary, securing data is an evolutionary and a constant endeavor. You can't say, okay, data is secure today, and now we can stop. Because, if you look at the keynote presentation that happened today, where Matthew talked about the cycle that it takes for developing the next big solution, and how quickly you get to know that it has been hacked. That the way to decrypt the existing strong algorithm has already been found, and then how do you build the next generation of algorithms? It's a long cycle. So given the fact that that is evolutionary, at this point in time, when we are looking at quantum computing, and we are realizing that as the number of qubits that become available to us increases, there is a possibility that the existing algorithms like the RSA or the electric key related ring algorithms as well, there is a possibility because of Shor's algorithms and Grover's algorithm that these systems will no longer be secure. So and the requirement for addressing that future insecurity is to start the work today, so that we can have alternate algorithms. And of course, the hybrid algorithms that you talked about, those are good examples. And this concept of looking at how we can secure the future from quantum attacks is this post-quantum cryptography. So I think that is the worry that comes in when we talk about the bane, is the fact that the existing strong considered algorithms are likely to be broken by a more scalable quantum computer. And therefore, that's the challenge that seems to be there. As long as we're working on these post-quantum cryptography solutions, I think we are working on them now, and NIST has a standard. There's a lot of standardization work that is happening at the ITU level and so on. We can discuss that in more detail later. I think we are on the right track. So there is a problem, but we are aware of it as an industry and we are looking at it. So I think that's a good thing. Coming back to the channel, I think there is an advantage, when you look at a pure quantum network and you look at how QKD, quantum key distribution, can be deployed, which leverages quantum entanglement, right? I think there is an opportunity there that even if the channel is tapped, you get to know. So that is today there is a limitation on the distances that you can enable QKD networks, but that process and that area is also growing. There are more advancements happening in that space. So we are now looking at another aspect of how QKD can make create quantum networks and bring in an additional element of security as well. The real challenge right now, not just from a network perspective, but overall, is that you have security is implemented across different systems for data at rest, data in motion, at different levels, like the web browser. Anindita talked about it, and so many, you will have different algorithms implemented everywhere. The whole system needs an overhaul over the next few years to be ready for quantum, right? I think so. That's where the challenge is.
Yeah, thanks, Ms. Reena, for your views on this, how this post-quantum cryptography and quantum key distribution systems are needed to rise up to the challenges which we are facing in the quantum thing. Now I'll try to move towards the Boon aspect of this, and we'll focus next question more on the Boon aspects, where we say that quantum technologies are expected to strengthen the machine learning or the deep learning capabilities, and this shall be helpful in the telecom network services or telecom operations. And I will move on to another set of panelists. So this question I am firstly directing to Dr. Manjunath. If you can please share your views on that.
Yeah, coming to the Boon aspect, yeah, quantum computers can be used for a varieties of applications, especially in the telecom sector. The standards in the coming days, which like the 5G or 6G standards, are mostly wound around the AI and ML algorithms. But although they do not specify like which of the infrastructure is required to be supported, for example, it could be quantum computer or any other thing. But making it a quantum computer makes a lot of sense, because the kind of optimizations we get from quantum computers are amazing. No classical computer can match with that. When you implement the machine learning algorithm, probably you will come to know, because you will be able to well demarcate the different feature maps, which are the input and the ingredient parts used in the machine learning algorithms. The second part is the local minimas, what we achieve in the conventional machines will be replaced by global minimas in a better optimized way. It's the same thing which has been exploited by Telecom Italia in one of the optimization problems. They use quantum computers for the cell placement problems, to address the cell placement problems in RAN, the radio access networks. So these are the most of the upcoming things. Also in 6G, the round trip time, or the time delays which are permitted, are of the order of microseconds, which is thousands times smaller than 5G. So to take decisions in the small stipulated time, it is very difficult for the classical computers to take. So quantum computers are the must for there, probably for routing. So research is going on in the direction of getting the most optimal routing paths using Pareto algorithms or Grover search algorithms to get the entire search route from end to end in real time, because the network will be so dynamic and so adaptive, especially when 6G is deployed. So these are some of the good points what we find in 6G or in the upcoming days, coming standards when quantum computers are deployed. That's why I thought.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Manjunath, for sharing your views on how quantum computers can be useful for solving various optimization problems, especially the example which you have given for 6G. So, yeah, your inputs are very welcome. So, the same question on how these quantum technologies can be a boon. Now, I'm redirecting to Professor Brijesh. Sir, your please views on this topic. Sir, I think you're on mute. So you're still not audible actually. I think there is some issue. Meanwhile, we can move to, or is it okay now? Can you just try again? No. We are not able to hear. So
Sir,
I think
can you, may I intervene, sir?
yeah.
Can you click on the same button, sir? Mic button? Uh, Not really, sir.
So meanwhile, I move to Dr. Monica for the same question and help the technical team to basically resolve that issue that Professor Brijesh is facing. Yeah, welcome, Dr. Monica.
Thank you, Prashant. And good morning to all of you, or good evening, wherever you are. Thanks for making me a part of this extremely important panel. I am really thankful to TSTSI for including quantum as a part of discussion. As Professor Manjunath has correctly said, uh, quantum is going to change the things. I very much feel that quantum technology is going to make an impact the way AI has changed our things, and in fact, it is changing. And telecom is no exception. I mean, imagine over 28 billions connected devices are connected, and telecom infrastructure is enabling their connectivity and services across to them. So that is, you have huge data and huge infrastructure which is being supported by the telecom providers. The 5G network is expected to lay a foundation for intelligent network, but in an isolated manner using artificial intelligence. However, fully intelligent network management and providing real innovative on-demand self-reconfigurable services will be part of 6G only. Massive connected complex network capable of rapidly responding to the user service call through real-time learning of network state, base station, cache contents, channel, air interface, radio spectrum, user information, its location, and many more. This can be actually seen as multi-state, multi-dimensional nature of quantum uncertainty principle, I think. So we are towards defining the complete network in a quantum framework. As you said about the Boon, quantum compute provides the capability of handling a large multidimensional data using its large tensor product spaces. So, when we started at the initial stage, the quantum machine learning was like being known to exploit these quantum compute to accelerate the intelligent data analysis method. But now we are kind of moving towards a better machine learning, quantum machine learning, where we are redefining the machine learning from quantum computers. So I feel machine learning, quantum computing, and quantum machine learning and their synergies with communication network can provide synergetic solutions which can solve many impossible and hard problems like big data analytics to realize self-sustaining and proactive wireless network. They can solve congestion problems in emerging ultra-dense IoT network. By bringing intelligence to physical layer of communication system, one can empower smart estimation of parameters, mitigation of interference, and I think management of many resources. Quantum communication is also emerging, which is actually based on the principle of quantum mechanics. It kind of exchanges the states and communicate. This novel field of research is like aiming quantum theories and giving us a future communication system with new functionalities and new capabilities. I think because of the quantum, we are going to see a complete new era of communication in the coming years. And I feel all these technologies together can make us, can give us a paradigm shift. Yeah, thank
Yeah.
you. That's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Monica, for your views on how these quantum technologies will be able to solve many problems related to big data analytics and self-sustaining wireless networks and ultra-dense IoT networks and smart estimation. So your views are very welcome. Now I will just check if Professor Brijesh Lal is there. So Professor Brijesh Lal, your views on the same question.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I hope I'm audible this time.
Yeah, you're audible. Very good. Thank
Perfect.
you.
So sorry for the glitch. I think sometimes technology does play tront. We've heard all the experts speak very lucidly about the specific technologies which are being positively or negatively being impacted by this growth in the space of quantum computing. I will not go into those details again, but answer this question at a slightly higher, more philosophical level. Uh, One, when we talk about security in telecom, there are two aspects of security. One is protecting the payload, which is the encryption kind of mechanisms that we've been talking about. The other is also the need to prevent attack on networks, denial of service, or other such attacks are also something that the telecom networks have to be wary of. They have to fight or be prepared against those as well. So those kind of attacks also become harder now to protect against, because quantum technology will allow you to create more complex and more difficult to handle attacks. But having said that, the assumption here seems to be that only the attacks are going to improve and not our ability to handle them. So that is where the Boon part of it, makes makes it important to be looked at carefully. Machine learning will be positively impacted by the advent of computing technologies which are quantum driven, and because of that, what will happen is your ability to protect the network and also protect the data will improve. The biggest challenge is identifying data. I mean, Matthew very had told us correctly in the early part of this session that different payloads have different time spans for which they need to be protected. So some payloads do not have that long lifespan in terms of their need to be protected against attack. But some of the more important information which has, for example, gene sequencing, uh, data which describes the human unambiguously, those kind of things need to be protected for multiple number of years, generations, even as Matthew told us. So that is where we'll have to, one, in future have a different way of protecting them, leverage quantum itself to come up with mechanisms for encryption, and whatever has already been encrypted has to be identified, and quantum computing can help us there identify some of those critical payloads, and we can look at them again. The other aspect is that the telecom networks, and this is what something that Monica and Manjunath also talked about, is that this is protecting the network and its payload, and that of course is possible. So the main part can be handled, but the boon part is something that will help us move to even higher levels of experiences in the future network. So what's happening is, with quantum computing in place, you can talk about networks which are more capable, both in terms of the way they are deployed and in the way they are configured. So with 5G, people moved towards software defined networks, and now what is going to happen is that the networks will have even more flexibility in terms of how they offer services. With quantum computing and machine learning sitting on top of it, you will be able to handle the requirements of each and every individual, because the amount of processing that you can now do is way higher. So the main part will certainly help us improve the experience that you get from the telecom networks of the future. And for the boon part, we have to be objective, that it's not just the attackers or the malicious intent entities are the ones who are going to leverage quantum technologies. The people who are on the other side of the fence will also gainfully utilize the gains of quantum. Back to you, Prashant.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Brijesh. So you covered the aspect of the advantages in the machine learning, and how this quantum will lead to more capable networks with the use of more powerful machine learning. And you also brought about an important point about the store and harvest attacks which can take place for some things like gene sequencing and all, which have a long storage life, and somebody stores that data now and decrypts it a number of years later. So that is the negative consequences, or the that aspect also you brought up that point very nicely. Now I will slightly now change the subject, where since we are discussing in TSDSI, where TSDSI is a standardization organization. So I would like to discuss with all panelists on what efforts are being done in all the various international standardization organizations in the area of quantum safe cryptography and quantum machine learning. So I'm aware of some of the organizations like Matthew also gave a view about what is being done in ETSI, and so since many of you will be connected to different standardization organizations, so with this perspective, I would like to ask first this question to Ms. Reena, who is also associated with IEEE Quantum Initiative, to know more about the IEEE efforts being done in the quantum area.
Sure. I think definitely, like every new technology, there's when it comes up, there's a need for standardizing. And with quantum, the first thing that needed standardization and the effort started a few years ago was the terminology, because I think initially the things were going all over the place in terms of how you define, and of course the topic of benchmarking continues to be a conversation which is very, very heated up wherever the topic is getting discussed. But slowly and surely convergence is happening. So IEEE is very deeply involved in the standards space. There are three standards that are running right now. One is P1913, which is the software-defined quantum communication related standard, P7130, which is the standard for quantum computing definitions, and P7131, which is the standard for quantum computing performance metrics and performance benchmarking. There is also conversations that have started off, and I'm part of some of those conversations around ethics in quantum, right? And it's important to note that while we have technical standards being developed, and these standards are not just IEEE, we have ISO, IEC working groups which are there. ITU is working on next generation networks, right? And then Of course, there is also terminology and vocabulary related standards which are being worked upon at the ISO level. And earlier in the discussion today, we had Matthew talk about the NIST, how NIST is driving the quantum cryptography related standardization. They've had 3 rounds of requests for proposals from the larger community, and they are in the 3rd stage where they're finally in the stage of deciding what should be the standardized mechanism for these encryption algorithms that should be used. And coming to the when we talk about standardization, this is largely the technical standardization that we've discussed. Given the nature of quantum, there is a larger conversation which is required, and it is already starting, is around the governance principles and the ethics related principles that need to happen. We are all very well aware of the fact that when AI sort of started off, and it started becoming mainstream, and then we started talking about the fact, okay, so what could be the repercussions of AI, so what should be the ethics principles for AI. Now that we have gone through that cycle, I think there is a lot more awareness, and we are very clear about the fact that the conversation for these principles for governance and for ethics need to happen right now. So there are working groups that have been set up at the World Economic Forum level. There are conversations on that which are happening within IEEE as well. These are all very early stages, but there is definitely work happening in that space as well. There are also several organizations which are motivated by the fact that technology and science is going to change the way things, change the way we live, and have lasting repercussions from many perspectives. And this seems to be a sociology and economics related subject that I'm sort of broaching here. But so there are organizations that have been newly set up to look at these aspects, and one such organization that I'm familiar about is JESTA, which is also looking at what could be the impact from a quantum perspective. So I think a lot of things that are happening right now. Anybody who's interested in really, I think this is a great opportunity for us in India, for TSDSI and entities like QETCI to actually get more deeply involved. I have already submitted a proposal to TSDSI for a partnership between QETCI and TSDSI from a standardization perspective, to focus that as a joint effort on the communication side, because there's no need for us in India to sort of create multiple duplicate efforts, right? So I think that's the summary that I wanted to talk about.
Yeah, thanks, Reena, for excellent inputs on what IEEE is doing in these quantum areas. And you mentioned about the various standards and work. So obviously, the various standard organizations should work in close coordination so that the repetition is not there. From the standardization perspective, I will also like to know views about views from some of my other esteemed panelists. So can we hear from Dr. Manjunath now?
Yeah. ITU is not left much behind. As we can see, ITU Study Group 13 has given mechanism for how machine learning can be used along with quantum computer to tackle the quantum key distribution. Especially, they are focusing on end-to-end QoS for the transmission of the key in the quantum scenarios. Like that, the ICT 20, they also come out with some mechanism for post-quantum cryptography that is in the field of beyond 5G. So these are some of the things to add to what the panelist has spoken.
Okay, fine. Yeah, thank you very much for your views on what ITU is doing. And now it is over to other panelists. Dr. Brijesh, if you have some views on other standardization organizations, or Professor Monica, Dr. Anindita, so you can please share. Yeah.
So not specific, direction that some bodies are taking, but in general, the good thing that has happened this time is that there's a very, very early acceptance of the fact that quantum technologies are becoming important, and people are looking at incorporating them into the standardization effort. So that part is really nice. Just as AI/ML is finding its way into telecom standardization, for 5G, it has found its place. For 6G and maybe even some later versions of 5G, 5.5 and beyond, will have paths of quantum inbuilt into it. So not specific standards, but in general, this is a very good thing that early adaptation, acceptance of technology is becoming important, and having these discussions, I think, is quite important.
Fine. Dr. Anandita, would you like to speak about some of the other standardization organizations? I know ITU is definitely working in the area of QKT standards as well, so you might be aware about those.
Yeah, so first, Matthew has summed it very well. He has given a holistic picture of the quantum safe cryptography, and Reena has summed it up mostly. But I would just like to add, particularly about the European Telecommunication Standards Institute, EHC. So they have a series of white papers on how to implement quantum safe cryptography, which I find very useful for the organizations to refer if they are interested in implementing quantum safe cryptography. They have clearly laid out principles, they have laid out the implementation security, they have laid out the use cases, how it can be integrated in the system. So that is one aspect about quantum key distribution. NIST has done another wonderful job in explaining how the post quantum can be used. HC has also commented about it. And standardization regarding quantum random number generators has also been, you know, referred in ITU. And it is very interesting because other agencies are also coming up as how to test the quantum entropy or how to standardize the quantum entropies. What are the ways? What are the tests which will help us evaluate the system, whether it is generating quantum or classical? So those things are also are there, and they are still there's a work in progress.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Nandita, for your views. And now I will, once we've discussed about standardization, definitely there is a lot more synergy required between various standardization organizations with respect to the quantum domain, so that there is no repetition of work across the standardization organizations. And now I will move to a slightly different aspect now. So, although we have been discussing about the security, the cryptography, and also the advantages of machine learning, so there is another important area which is with respect to the privacy preserving technology for the data analytics. So we know that homomorphic encryption is being considered as one candidate for the privacy preserving technology for data analytics, where you can derive certain inferences from data without actually having the data in the plain form. The data is homomorphically encrypted, and still you can derive inferences from them. Now, these future homomorphic encryption algorithms may be more useful in that area because a further lot of research is happening. And these homomorphic algorithms, they promise to be quantum safe, as well as the solution for this third-party privacy-preserving data analytics for inference, as well as, in fact, training. Also, a lot of work is happening that AML training should also happen on homomorphically encrypted data. So I would request Dr. Manjunath, who has given a recent talk on this quantum homomorphic encryption, if he can share his views on how these quantum technologies can impact the homomorphic encryption-based algorithms and help in strengthening privacy in future telecom networks.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, there are two aspects for that, are two very varied implementations for that. In the first aspect, the device is a classical device, like my machines or your machines are so many IoT devices where the data originates in a classical machine and that has to consume some service in a quantum machine, and the data has to be put onto the channel. For that, what we do, we start with the data and we first homomorphically encrypt it, classical homomorphic encryption. Of course, then that data is to be encrypted or encoded into quantum states using the orthonormal basis functions. So, for example, the ones, zeros, or whatever the string of bits we have, that has to be translated into quantum states before we put into the channel. And once we do that, it will hit the quantum machine, and it will be, anyway, it is homomorphically encrypted without much of a hassles, because any any of the quantum operations can be thought of as a linear and scaled operation. So I can happily use the quantum machines and consume the service and use it. This is possible even today. We can use a quantum machine and use our data put in a homomorphically encrypted form, and the quantum machines can happily and readily support that. So this is also a solution for our intermittent transition to quantum fully quantum states or fully quantum world, where we may have to use the quantum devices, and today we may have to face the issues of hacking or intrusion because of the quantum devices. This is one part of it. The second part is my device is a quantum device. I have quantum states created in my device, and I have to consume a service in another quantum machine. How do I do that? Because I cannot put the same quantum data in our regular channel. So that before that, the data needs to be put into an entangled form. So that needs a special care of that. Means we may have to go for quantum communication, like what we do in our QKD distribution, right? Quantum key distributions. So the data, the quantum states need to be entangled using the different polarized light or whatever the string of photons we create with that coherent string of photons. And before we hit another quantum machine, it has to put into the channel. There the real problem comes. There is a lot of technological advancements are really expected. Today, the maximum distance what we can do on the terrestrial links is around 500 kilometers, if I am right. Although we can make use of satellites links to for the repeaters or the thing. The main issue in this thing is we cannot use repeaters over there, like what we do in our optic fiber channels, where we get the data, decrypt it, and further re-encode it, boost it, and encode it, and further transmit it. That is not possible in the quantum world, because the moment you intercept the quantum qubits or whatever quantum data, so it will lose its purity, because it will coalesce into one of the known states, like binary states, and it will no longer be used for further transmission. So the repeaters in the quantum world to handle the quantum state, that is one research area which may help us to transmit it over longer distances. The other thing is the quantum decoherence or quantum noise. So the quantum states will not stay for long, like what we store our data in our thumbnails or hard drives. You cannot store quantum data for so many years or months, right? It will be very short time. It may be the highest time what we can see a quantum state or quantum data exists in a quantum machine is less than a second, that too in the laboratory conditions. So it is very short duration. You cannot, the states will get decoherent or they get destroyed. So if you need to transmit over a longer duration or longer distances, you need to preserve its purity for a longer duration, right? For that is another technical area, and advancement in that area may help us to use the quantum computers in a better way.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Manjunath, for your views on this important area, because this privacy preserving technology for future is very important, and homomorphic encryption, and if quantum can help in improving that technology, it shall be very useful, because as we know, a lot of countries have passed these privacy laws, and India is also soon going to have it, because the bill is there since a long time. And this is importance of privacy is going to rise in future, and we need encryption combined with the ML technologies to solve this issue, where we can have the privacy maintained of the individual's data while still doing the training and inference, because the training requires very large scale data, and so we need large scale data also without compromising on privacy. So this is a very important future research area. Thank you for your views here. And another point, another question which I would like to ask all the panelists is how we can work further and to strengthen the quantum ecosystem in India, and to improve upon quantum safe cryptography as well as quantum machine learning for future telecom networks. So it is, I think, open to any panelists who would like to share views on that.
I think if I may, add something here, because I'm deeply concerned with accelerating the ecosystem in India. I think the real need is, first of all, I'm very thankful to be part of this discussion. I'm one of those persons who gets involved in this discussion and then immediately jumps to another discussion which comes from the prospect of market opportunity creation. See, every innovation, when it hits the market, or when it starts impacting on creating, we start looking at solutions that it is going to provide. It has a full cycle, and the cycle comprises of deep research work. It require the corporate sector getting involved, where actual solutions or actual products start getting worked on, whether at the hardware or the software level, and that brings in a requirement for a skill or a workforce development. Because today, if you really see the situation, the workforce, there's a dire need for workforce development and for skilled people for all the various kinds of quantum applications, solutions, hardware, etc. related work that is required to be done. So that these are all essential parts of the ecosystem. And then, of course, when you say you're going to create these solutions, who are the people who are going to use the solutions? Even if you're talking about quantum cryptography, or if you're talking about the network, there is a whole value chain in the industry which needs to actually align to this process. So, for example, from a networking perspective, in this conversation that we are having, we don't have Cisco, we do not have any of the players from an infrastructure perspective which get embedded as part of the discussion. So so that's not to say that that the conversation, this has been a great conversation. I'm just trying to tell you that those elements of the ecosystem have to all fall into place for real progress and harmonious progress to happen in the right direction, in the right way. Now, if we just look at the ecosystem in India, there is also this other tail end of the consumer industry segment, right? So, for example, we talk about optimization related problems that need to be solved, and which can be solved on the network or off the network, on the compute devices, for various things like logistics. This network optimization problem is very similar to a logistics optimization problem, which is a different kind of network, right? The algorithms that you'll end up using will be very similar in nature, and you're finding the lowest minima, and you could use either an Anylink simulator or an actual hardware Anylink device for that, or do it on a quantum computer, in some sort of a simulated environment today and a real one in the future. So, but who's going to use that? Are those industries even tuned into this whole conversation? Do they understand what the impact of quantum could be? In some cases, the problems are so complex that it requires both these multiple entities to work together in the research mode from now itself for viable and really meaningful solutions to emerge. A good example is drug discovery. There are elements in the drug discovery process which require very deep involvement of people who are part of that process and quantum experts to actually find more real solutions. And this work has started worldwide. More of this work needs to happen in India. More of these ecosystem players, everybody who's part of this ecosystem needs to come together. And I think conferences like these, getting people together to talk about very specific parts, I think they are a great thing. But from an ecosystem perspective, there is a need for more collaboration. I also believe that there is a need for more open source projects in this space, so that more experimentation can happen between various entities, and this huge talent base that we have in India. People on the ground, whether they are students or young professionals or even the experienced people. If you throw a problem at them, I'm pretty convinced that they are able to solve it under all circumstances. It's just a question of creating those right opportunities, and I think open source projects are a great way to sort of start that work. Open projects, whether it is open source or not, we can work it out. But open projects which multiple participants in the ecosystem can participate in, I think that's the way to go.
So I will quickly add to what Reena had said. She has given a beautiful, realistic picture and the need of the hour. But I would like to bring out some proactive points which CDAC is working on. So CDAC is working towards a quantum hub, focusing primarily on the applications of quantum computing. We are working into the four verticals of quantum application or quantum technology. One is quantum accelerator, other is quantum simulator, third is quantum sensing, and fourth is quantum communication. Now the approach is collaborative approach with CDAC teams spread out across India, academic institutions, and industry. So we are actually bringing all these three groups and trying to address the important applications of this technology. Now, very soon, India will soon have its own quantum computer and or superconducting or ion trap. It will be coming out. And also we are progressing towards a quantum secure metro area network. So unless we actually start working towards direction and implement them, so the knowledge which we will gather, which will that will actually go and address the quantum standardizations or solve those issues. And because there is no one answer, different nation will have different answers to it and different mechanism to address it. Exactly what Reena had said. So I agree with her totally. And but I'm being optimistic and looking at the proactive steps which the institution is taking. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very optimistic about it as well. I would like to add that, and that's why I left a corporate job to start this Quantum Ecosystem Technology Council of India. By the way, uh, between QETCI and IEEE, we are planning an open source project for industry use cases for that market opportunity creation, and I think there's an opportunity to collaborate on that with CDAC and everybody else here as well. Yeah.
Yes, it'll be welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And we've had an excellent discussion and multiple rounds. So I would now like to take some of the audience questions because audience is an integral part of the conference and is asking, I see in the Q&A tab, a lot of questions. So one question I see from Ganesh Tyagarajan, he says, where can you find the details of the IEEE quantum standard initiatives? Is there any IEEE industry connect for these standards?
Yeah, I can take that up.
Yeah.
I'm actually, in fact, for standards, we have a dedicated person who's leading that effort as part of the IEEE organization itself. I'm a volunteer, but he's an employee of IEEE, Sri Chandra. I'm actually posting his, in the chat window, I'm giving his email ID. And given the interest in this topic, I'm going to propose to him that we do a reach out session, which we will invite sent to TSDSI as well for educating everybody about the standards that are happening in IEEE and how people can participate. So that's an action item I'm taking back. I've also shared the email ID in the chat window.
Thank you. So I will just quickly take the other audience questions because our other distinguished speaker, Mr. Stipend, has been able to resolve his technical issues and we'll soon going to have the second keynote talk. So just I will quickly wrap up this session. So another question is, what is the relationship between ethics and governance and military applications?
So I'll take that question because I talked about governance, or if you want somebody else to take that. Prashant.
Yeah, if you can quickly go through it so that we
Yeah.
can just move. Yeah.
Yeah. So today the conversation that is happening around governance is not involving military applications. That I think the ethics and the governance discussions have just started. If you look at AI in ethics also, there are two levels of discussions. Ethics in AI also has military applications, and that conversation is usually restricted to a very while there are conversations around it, I think nation states have their own approach in terms of how they want to approach this problem, and those discussions have to be solved at the United Nations level or a different level. Recommendations can come from these groups that actually work on ethics considerations and so on, right? So I think the same will be true for quantum. The conversation on governance is more around the principles that we should be following. Today, I'll give you an example to make it real. Today, there are governments and countries which have invested heavily in quantum. And there are other countries in the world which are focusing on many more basic problems. Hunger is a problem. These are the third world countries which are still striving. If progress happens in quantum in the world in an asymmetrical manner, it will not be good for humanity. So it is important to see how all-round progress is happening and there is access to quantum-related education around the world. So some of the early governance topics could be things like equitability and how that can be established and so on. But this is a long topic, so I'll stop here. I'm very aware of the time and we can probably take it up offline. Yeah.
Fine. I would request audience, if they have unanswered questions, please post to the organizers and we'll get back to you because in the interest of time, now I would like to wrap up this panel discussion. So we have had an excellent panel discussion where our distinguished speakers have focused on both aspects, that is how these quantum technologies can be a bane as well as a boon for future telecom networks. We have discussed about the cryptographic threats and the mechanisms which are being done to improve the current cryptography aspects. And we have also discussed how these quantum computers will be advantageous to the machine learning and deep learning, which is going to be a very key element in the future telecom networks. Further, we have also discussed about the various international standardization bodies, how they are working. So, in the limited time, what we could have a gist about what IEEE, ETSI, ITU, these bodies are doing. Also, we had a brief discussion on the quantum homomorphic encryption and how it can be useful for privacy preserving technologies in the future. And further, we also had a discussion to strengthen the quantum ecosystem in India, what we can do further. So I thank the distinguished panelists and the audience. And in the interest of time, I would like to conclude here and thank you very much to all the panelists for their time, the precious time for this discussion. I hope this discussion will be very useful for the audience and the stakeholders who are present in this distinguished forum, and they can definitely take up some of these things further. And I also further see that there is actually a need of a policy by the government itself, that it should mandate that all the telecom products that are deployed in India after a particular cutoff date must have a roadmap for quantum safe migration, because we have been discussing this subject for quite some time. Now, there's a definitely need for concrete policy. And as Dr. Nandita pointed about the CDAC's effort in this area, so in CDOT is also putting a lot of efforts in all these technologies like post-quantum cryptography and quantum key distribution. And we also want to do in the forefront of these upcoming technology areas to safeguard our current and the future telecom systems from these new threats, and also further to understand the quantum machine learning and how it can be useful for the future telecom networks. So with that, I thank you all, and I look forward to the next talk. So thank you, dear panelists. And now I would request Professor Brijesh Lal to kindly introduce our second keynote speaker, Dr. Stephen A. Ukovec.
Right. Thank you, Prashant. So we are privileged to have Stephen here today with us. There were a few glitches in the beginning, but thankfully he has been able to join us now. So Stephen is MSc in ICT Security and is the group CEO of ITK Swiss, which is a cryptography focused group offering unique, symmetric, post-quantum crypto for encrypted and integrity protected IPTV, 5G, safe electronic payments, and beyond. So a lot of important areas are being addressed by the organization Stephen is involved with. Further, he is an invited lecturer at the University of Geneva, Switzerland, for quantum informatics and post-quantum, which is quantum safe cryptography. So it is indeed a privilege to have him as a speaker today. Thank you so much for making time for us. Over to you, Stephen.
We're not able to hear. Is it with my side only, or others are also facing?
We can't hear.
Aditi, we can't hear him.
Yeah.
Can you share your screen again and with uh, system audio?
Access to the Hermit on the computer. So if
Yes,
it's
fine.
easier for you, I could share the screen myself using the Hermit. I believe it will work. And just you share the audio through this Google Meet. You hear me? Okay, good. So in that case, let's do that. I will share my screen on the workstation using the Hermit, if you allow me, of course. Or can you see my slides already? If you see them already, then let's go with what works. But if not, I can share myself the slides.
Aditi here.
Yes.
He can directly connect with the Meet now. We can drop from.
But only for the slides,
Google
not
Meet.
the audio. Only for the slide, not the audio. We have to use Google Meet for the audio. So it's okay. Okay, then let's start. Everything is in place, right? If you hear and see me well, I can start. Okay. Okay, very good. Let's start. Let's not lose more time. Thank you very much. And sorry again for those technical issues which are out of our control. And hopefully we can have a better technical meeting experience next time with Indian solutions. Quantum machine learning from cryptography cracking through financial optimization back to QML-enabled cryptanalysis is the topic of my talk today. You have heard probably a lot about the implications of quantum and in particular quantum machine learning to cryptography today. Yet, you are yet to hear the most important part. And just to set the context, today in the digital world, we are speaking of around 19 trillion US dollars global business. And in that global business, around 30% already amounts to the lack of security or trust in the digital system worldwide, and simply put, to cybercrime. So already now, today, without quantum affecting the security of cryptography, at least not publicly, what happens militarily is another topic. We already have a very high rate of insecurity in the digital world, let alone what will hit us if we keep unprepared for the quantum tsunami regarding cryptography. And in particular, the very recent announcements of exascale quantum computers are of further concern to this regard, which further justify to focus an important part of our efforts on this aspect, even though we will, of course, always and as well deal with the other, which are perhaps seen on a more positive light, aspects of QML. So without further ado, here is the slide of the quantum machine learning as a whole, which describes some possible applications of it. As you can probably see, there are very interesting potential applications, such as in genetics, for drug research and so on, recommendation systems, and financial investment, notably, but not limited to it. And those applications are expected to take off within the coming years. though as we will see a bit later, at least in the telecom sector, which is the main focus here as a telecom standards body, is not quite yet there, but we already see the very important promises of quantum machine learning in that space. Now the keynote which I am delivering will go as follows. First, we will deal with the main benefits of the quantum machine learning in an extended way, and then come to the logical follow-up that it needs, even itself, quantum-resistant cryptography to be able to withstand the circumstances that it itself creates. Thereafter, we will see that still there are some issues which are less of a technical nature and more of a commercial and political one towards adapting smoothly to this new deal, which is given by quantum and especially when aided by machine learning. But there is an elephant in the room as often. And then we'll go to the questions. And of course, last but not least, I will show the bibliography and present all the acronym definitions that are used throughout the presentation. Coming to the main benefits of quantum machine learning. Quantum machine learning is really an excellent tool for tackling NP-hard problems, such as the discrete logarithm solving. And in the real life, that's very good if you are trying to, for instance, break emerging digital currency alternatives to fiat money. So fiat money, for people not in that field, means normal, classical currencies such as the US dollar, the Swiss franc, the Indian rupee, and so on and so forth. And bad if you find yourself in the other camp. So in the case of India, we can say actually, seeing only from that restricted point of view and according to the Indian law where cryptocurrency is not allowed, it is actually a very positive development, given that today, most if not all cryptocurrencies based on elliptic curves for their signatures, which themselves rely on the discrete logarithm for a hardness assumption, which literally melts before QML, as we can see through the recent IBM research, which is provided in the bibliography to this regard. So actually, and that's very important to note, even without the use of machine learning combined with quantum computing, but just by using quantum computing against elliptic curve cryptography, which is based on the discrete logarithm, it will be, if it is not already, one of the first cryptographic mechanisms to be broken by quantum computing due to notably the low key size. On to the main benefits of quantum machine learning outside of the field of cryptanalysis. In finances, you will have basically no more guess or so-called manual work, as to put it simply, QML will have your back, but maybe as well your job if you are a financial analyst today. And JP Morgan Chase published a study on the potential for quantum machine learning to help and provide further insights in finances. And the outcome is that it is a very promising and potentially game-changing tool, which will define non-intuitive parameters in the future, such as price setting, which more often than not is done using a bit of statistics and a lot of guesswork. There, it will be done very precisely using a machine, which is aided by a machine learning program, which can visualize all the states in parallel, as is what quantum basically enables, being billions of times faster than classical computing for specific applications, which, for instance, we are considering here. And actually, already today, there are expert systems in some big financial institutions which give them a tremendous advantage over other actors in the financial world and in financial markets. because by having access to a very large pool of data and being able with a classical computing, even if supercomputing, but not quantum yet, to gather some instantaneous or near instantaneous insights on market developments from various companies and without committing insider knowledge breach in the classical way. Digitally, they gain such an advantage. And now, aided by quantum machine learning over the coming years, this is expected, again, in this JP Morgan Chase paper, which I provide a reference for in the bibliography, to literally explode as it will not be anymore near real time. It will eventually become real time. So in real time, institution with enough data streams and sources about the functioning of organizations around the world will be able to foresee next steps in a very swift manner, which will give them tremendous advantage in the financial markets, and even poses the question of whether the rules of the game will need to be adapted to cater to that change, because this is, again, tremendous game-changing development that is just about to happen and give total superiority to such an institution that has access to both a large pool of data on many organizations around the world and to quantum machine learning able to exploit this data, which again poses some questions as to the ethical issues this could raise, but that is yet another topic. And the moral of this story is that tomorrow's quant engineers, as they are called, might well be an evolutionary algorithm on a quantum cloud. But we will see more regarding that quantum cloud, which, by the way, already exists, also by IBM, for instance, but also other players, meanwhile, which are putting on the cloud quantum resources available to use right now. So we are not speaking of something that is a few years from now. It is already available right now, even though it's not yet very powerful. What is available on the cloud, it is available, and people can already learn and try and test their algorithms, including machine learning algorithms, which adapt particularly well, according to all the corresponding literature, to quantum computers. Yet, hope is eternal, as our Japanese friends would put it. And here I provide an extract from a paper which is published by Telecom, Deutsche Telekom in Germany. It is in German, but I will provide you the essence of it, which is that with quantum machine learning applied to telecom, and as I have been specifically asked to provide as part of this presentation, there are very interesting potential use cases as the classification of misuse and other abuse and abusive behavior, for instance, in telecommunications, in conversations, let's say someone calling a client service and asking for some prestation, for some benefits that he or she is not entitled to, and so on and so forth. And as well, for the good apples, after we spoke about the bad apples, to determine when is the optimal time to call them. So, for instance, maybe if we were aided by quantum machine learning for this meeting, it would have recommended us to start using alternative meeting system ahead of the time so that we would have been able to deliver the keynote on time. This is certainly a possibility. But as we speak of apples, actually, it is important to, as well as with the previous use case, to watch that this doesn't lead us, if not done properly, into a dystopian, or to say the least, suboptimal scenario, as you could incorrectly be classified as a bad apple. And just to make a parallel, I just had to acquire the latest device of a brand bearing the similar name, the same name. And even though I'm in Switzerland and I didn't leave Europe and almost didn't leave Switzerland for a while due to the complicated international travel situation with COVID, when I first switched on this phone and after setting the local language, which is French because we are in French-speaking Switzerland, the location was by default continental China. So errors happen always, every time. And even in simple programs, let alone complex quantum machine learning ones. So we have to be very wary about the possibility of either involuntary or even worse, voluntary so-called AI poisoning, which would lead to very bad outcomes if not detected at the right time for the users, for the legitimate users of the systems. Onto the reality of the quantum ML for telecoms, as per the report by Deutsche Telekom, and given the access that they had at the time, and that's only 2 months ago, so in August, in terms of quantum machinery, they came to the conclusion that it's not yet giving a quantum advantage with respect to the classical solutions that they employ to attain the same goals. So for now, they did not find a practical, real use case that performs better using quantum machine learning than using classical means. That doesn't mean that it will not be the case tomorrow, so to speak, or the day after, and most certainly it will. And actually, even this news that appeared very recently of exascale quantum computers could very much change this and much faster than anticipated, as Deutsche Telekom is far from being the only actor in this space. And there are many others in the world, and particularly in Asia, who might be even more advanced as of now in this area. Then we come to the further consideration, which stems from the one on financial applications, that even though it is on a quantum cloud, yet it will need to be using quantum resistant cryptography. Because with quantum, you clearly have a double-edged sword, where on one side you can gain insights on everything, everyone, every time, including their communications, assuming they are not well protected, or cryptocurrencies, assuming they continue as they do today. But on the other hand, even your very precious insights will have to be protected against the very same occurring, because it would be unrealistic to expect that only one organization has access to such means. Indeed, we expect that by 2023 or latest 2025 to 2030, any commercial organization with a sufficient budget will have access to such large-scale quantum computers. And if any commercial organization can have access to it, that means that nation states had access to it already before, in principle, and that criminal groups will get it the same day that legitimate companies get it. And that is where it becomes extremely critical to have everything protected properly. And again, and that is not us saying it, it's for instance IBM with their announcement by the then CRO, and now CEO of IBM, who is from India, by the way, that large-scale quantum computers would be commercially available in a form that will be a danger to current cryptography as early as 2023 from their labs, which doesn't mean a competitor couldn't come with something to the market earlier, which eventually already has happened, even maybe not to the public market. So we are speaking of a tremendous urgency of migrating to safe algorithm. And one issue here being that beyond discrete logarithm and factorization, which are the basis for elliptic curve cryptography and RSA, respectively, which are the main mechanisms used today, for instance, when you are connecting safely, so to speak, to a website using a secure connection for establishing the keys to encrypt the communication. Such mechanisms are being used in the background. Beyond the fact that this will be cracked even with quantum without ML, sans ML, machine learning applied to quantum cryptanalysis becomes very interesting. Again, symmetric cryptography, in particular, the advanced encryption standard, abbreviated AES, for which I provide a reference in the bibliography as well, and it's from the year 2000, standardized in the US. It served the baseline for the comparison with the candidate post-quantum cryptography. So here PQC means post-quantum cryptography, which is not always the case, but in this particular context, it means that, which are alternatives to the aforementioned discrete log and factorization-based solutions such as ECC and RSA. So here we have an issue which is not yet seen by many, which is that even the replacements that are currently being considered by NIST, for instance, as part of the post-quantum competition, post-quantum cryptography competition, at the security level, which they take as a minimum reference level, which is the equivalent to AES 128, is actually not sufficient to withstand the shock of quantum-enabled and even less so quantum ML-enabled attacks. And the bottom line is that up in the quantum cloud, quantum or not cloud, there is no security now and tomorrow, unfortunately, if nothing is done about that. As already in 2019, Microsoft Research, the University of Oxford and Royal Holloway found in the ePrint number 2019-1146 that using the Q-Sharp compiler from Microsoft, a 25% increase in the performance of Grover's algorithm, which is typically used to break AES and similar algorithms in some future, is obtained. And the authors in their paper admit they don't know why. So it's kind of a Kasparov moment already, where the machine beats the chess player and they don't know why, but it beats it. We have our explanation why, which is due to the inherent weaknesses of the AES key schedule, which were highlighted by other papers 10 years before that. For instance, by Biryukov et al. Regarding the related key attacks on AES, and which is most likely what the quantum compiler is exploiting here. And again, here we are speaking of so-called naive or dumb, if you wish, quantum compiler, not a highly optimized machine learning algorithm to achieve the same goal, even though some similarities can already be found, and we can say it's a rough primary example of such an application. Now research is ongoing to actually optimize quantum compilers using machine learning. And that is eventually what will bring us, if not right now, a few years from now, to fully break such techniques that are right now still used as the reference point for what should be used tomorrow to protect against quantum. I stress that point. So everything you heard about QSC before is fine, but it is not the whole story and it is not sufficient. It is fine as a transition which should have already started a few years back, but actually already now we should be preparing the next steps, as I am convinced all the relevant large technology organizations are doing as well, even though they are not so vocal about it as we are. And now on to the next slides. That brings us to a perfect transition to the fact that, simply put, here be dragons. There is not only a discussion about technicity and engineering or mathematics. We are really speaking of high commercial stakes because of the size of the market that I mentioned in the very beginning, and even political stakes because of the implication for nation states of such technologies in the realms of espionage and so on and so forth. And interestingly, the industry's reaction to Microsoft paper mentioned just before, so the 2019 paper, in the Ieee, which was presented in the Ieee QSC conference in 2019, happening in Seattle in November, where we were participating as well as our host here, was to stick to an even lower standard. So at the time, 3GPP decided to stick to 128 bits when not below in other realms, such as what is dealt with in ISO, in some ISO committees regarding e-payment, payment with credit cards and so on, where we are still, as of now, using and allowing the use and confirming for now the allowing of the use of even lower algorithms, such as triple des, which is already broken by all means now without quantum and without any, let's say, very powerful computers. But still there is a tremendous inertia because of financial concerns and because of the cost of replacing all existing cryptographic deployments, especially if it is implying to replace the hardware. This is a huge challenge from a commercial standpoint, and eventually we are now coming to a breaking point as vertical after vertical, and despite this humongous opposition from various interest groups which currently have a common interest but that may very quickly diverge, as we have seen, for instance, happening this summer in terms of the financial market. With ITU-T standards leading the change in the telecom world with X.1197 already in 2019, it's Amendment 1 precisely, and then complemented by a corrigendum as the ITU-T team forgot to publish important bibliographic reference by an Indian team, by the way, who discovered that the quantum safe algorithm, thought to be quantum safe algorithm, and true, is not that safe against man-in-the-middle attacks. And this is a concern, by the way, that we voiced to the organizers of the NIST competition, but we have yet to get a definitive answer on that aspect, which is, of course, important if N-true is to be used in the near future to replace, for instance, current key exchange solutions. So still an open research questions as far as we are concerned. And we also have, very importantly, now the X.1811 International Telecommunications Union standard. I hope it was mentioned before. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to join, but that's a really landmark standard because it's the first worldwide standard for quantum safe 5G, and the first and only one. And it happens that the one and only good practice, as was the consensus to call it, in the standard is provided by quantum resistant cryptography, which is a technology which we have patented. And as well, the fact that CISA in the US, so the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Administration, as well as the National Security Administration and the Department of Homeland Security, all of the United States of America, have now dealt the final blow to, so to speak, quantum naysayers. Why? Because they have clearly stated, one after the other, that strong cryptography and 256 bits symmetric cryptography and equivalent asymmetric mechanisms by extension is the bare minimum to resist, period, to resist quantum attacks, whether with or without ML, machine learning, by the way. So that kind of concludes the debate, at least from a very official standpoint, even though in the strange world of ISO standardization, the message still takes time to reach consensus, because unfortunately in some topics where science should drive the debate, it is still political consensus that drives it. instead of science. And hopefully that could change in some near future following the example of other standards organizations. And I'm very hopeful, by the way, that under the Indian leadership that is about to happen of 3GPP, this is also to be the case in 3GPP, in particular SA3. Now coming to the elephant in the room, yet the proverbial elephant in the room is still there. Quantum machine learning, aside from practical contemporary considerations, such as the fact that AES, for instance, is already broken, if you wish, in the classical setting, if you have some local access. So using side channel attacks, you can very easily extract the key material from a SIM card, for instance, which runs the mileage algorithm in current network implementations, and which in turn use AES under the hood. And it is using AES 128, but for that matter, it doesn't change anything. The key material can be extracted when AES is used under the hood because of the weaknesses, actually the very same weaknesses that we mentioned before, which also enable all sorts of other attacks in it, in its key schedule. That is a major issue that will, aside from quantum and in addition to quantum ML, as hinted in the previous slides, drive the need to replace it at the end of the day. And I almost mean literally at the end of the day. Meanwhile, we are providing a unique patented solution in the form of a quantum-resistant SIM card, which is itself integrating a unique trademarked algorithm, which is called EAES, for Enhanced AES, which caters to those weaknesses and corrects those weaknesses of the original AES while still reusing existing hardware, which is very important because it means you can do this migration and cost is not such an argument anymore. Of course, there will be some more cost in terms of energy spending because you will switch from 128-bit cryptography to 256, but eventually I hear that 3GPP anyways continued studying that possibility. So that should not be an impediment at all, given the obvious need to do that. And I also see, by the way, which is very interesting from the political standpoint again, that the candidate algorithm from China Mobile at the time in the X.1811, which has been discarded from there because Ericsson already in 2019 showed it was not quantum safe and not even safe in classical setting 1 year later, still is seeking to be standardized via ETSI Sage, if I'm not mistaken. And that is really impressive given that it has been proven as not being quantum safe, basically not delivering 256-bit entropy. And now, in addition, that officially at the highest US level, and the US is basically leading still today cryptography in the free world, it has been recognized that 256-bit is the minimum. And they provide an algorithm which doesn't ensure 256-bit entropy. So it's a direct contradiction from a scientific point of view. And therefore, if we are to follow science, it should be immediately discarded. Last but not least, to answer my esteemed SD8, so SD8 is Standing Document 8 on Cryptography, which is being edited by ISO SC27 Working Group Working Group 2, so ISO IEC 27 Working Group 2 on post-quantum cryptography. So that's the official publication so far of that group on post-quantum cryptography, which has yet to be updated as part of the co-editors. I'm hopeful that we will soon be able to make a meaningful update reflecting the latest advancements and facts that have been mentioned. So who gave the keynote before in introduction to this speech was as well with me in 2018 already at the Quantum Safe Cryptography event by Ieee, where we had a poster presentation. I even remember ourselves taking a nice photo together before our poster presentation. Should know that we do provide solutions going beyond backwards compatibility, as we already told their company in late 2019, early 2020. And that, of course, is for the next generation of hardware. So where the backwards compatibility will be broken and new hardware will be deployed, which eventually will happen in any case, because you have servers, they last for maybe 5 or 10 years, and then you have to replace them. But without rushing that, of course. And that is to happen from our side using hardware crypto processors that are made in India for the world and patented. And thank you very much for your attention. Oh, and one last remark. Funnily enough, in quantum machine learning literature, PQC, which in cryptography means post-quantum cryptography, which is, by the way, a very pompous word to say this, because we are not yet fully quantum safe in the current deployments, and we already speak about post-quantum, but anyways, that's the formal title, actually means parametric quantum circuits in the quantum machine learning field, as if one discarded the other. And I will leave you with that final word. Thank you very much, and I am open to any question you may have, whether here or online. And you have also the presentation, the QR code to our website, where you can find the way to contact us via email. And let me switch now to the chat so that I can answer any message that would have been here. Thank you.
Thanks, Stipend, for your excellent talk.
Most welcome.
Are there any audience question answers in the Q&A time? Professor Brijesh, can you just check?
I just checked. I don't see any question, but there was a question for him earlier. Somebody specifically asked him a question. Let me go up and check. It was about where is it gone? Yeah. So he says. So this is Devor, that QRC Crypto.ch have the fully approved quantum resistant cryptography patent, yet nobody refers to it. So they want to check, why does nobody refer to this particular thing? So we have a question from EPFL. Can you?
Okay.
Yeah.
I believe I addressed his question, and I thank him heartfully for asking it. I believe I have addressed the question in my speech already, but please ask if there are any further questions, of course.
Okay, so there are no other questions that I see, Prashant. So maybe the panelists can ask a couple of questions, or maybe you yourself.
I see Dibakar Das asking us in the chat, could you throw some light, I believe, about your patented solution? Yes, of course. So we are speaking of a published international patent called the quantum resistant SIM card. It is also in national phase in India, which is, by the way, the first geography where we chose to do so, because it's a priority for us. And it is including, but not limited to, the trademarked EAS algorithm, so it's a US trademark, and as well in some other geographies, which is enhancing the AES algorithm to make it quantum resistant and even against quantum ML and beyond, by providing sufficient security margins by virtue of A, improving the key schedule by replacing it literally by cryptographically secure mechanisms, and B, by having a higher number of rounds, even at the currently standard 256 minimum quantum safe key size, we follow the recommendations that already in the year 2000, at the time of the NIST competition for AES, have been provided by the competitors of the Ringedale, which has been selected as the AES, to use a slightly higher number of rounds to have a sufficient security margin, or let's say same security margin as the competing solutions. But eventually it was the Ringedale that has been chosen, and with a lower number of rounds for performance considerations, which again we believe were fine at the time, so in the year 2000, but definitely need an upgrade today, given the evolution of all techniques, including quantum-enabled ML, that will dramatically change the situation. And definitely, if nothing is done to upgrade it and to save it, break the promise that has been made at the time that it would secure data well into the 21st century. So actually, more than being opponent to it, we are saving it, because all the processors that are optimized currently for AES, and that's where the value lies, because typically, similarly to our cipher, it's implementations that are patented, but not the cipher itself, can be reused, meaning that on the servers, you don't have to change any hardware, and it's very low capex. The only thing that you have to change eventually as part of your deployment is on the end user devices, where you will either swap the SIM cards, or on newer devices, this will eventually get integrated as an option on the eSIMs, so that any operator can choose whether they like to use it or not, at their own risk, of course. And so this makes it really easily accessible and under fair and non-discriminatory licensing conditions to any operator or company, as a matter of fact, that would like to use it, because we are now in the era of 5G, where, for instance, in Germany, you have Audi deploying their own 5G network, just as an example. And obviously, such companies in particular in the automotive field would be very much encouraged to make such deployments quantum safe as per the ITU-T X.1811, and respectively the one and only good practice that is contained herein. This is something I see someone asking for references. Of course, we will provide everything as well later, but right now you can find it if you search for X.1811 on the ITU-T website. It is public, and you can find as well the patent declaration in the same location, the associated patent declarations. All the ITU-T texts have the benefit of being freely accessible, as opposed to some other standardizing organizations' texts which are paid for in general. Here it is publicly accessible, so just on the ITU-T.in website, X.1811, and inside you look for the good practice, and outside from it you look for the quantum resistant SIM card patent declaration, or you just look for quantum resistant SIM card, which again will lead you to the very same. And last but not least, as you will see in the supporting documentation, there have been publications both at the ePrint level and as well more specific from a leading security company of the 20th and early 21st century here in Switzerland, which in essence, in a way, are our competitors, and that's why we have mandated them to analyze our solution, because we knew they would not be easy on us, and they were not, but yet have confirmed that our solution is the way to go if we are to upgrade AES for it to withstand the test of time, and in particular make it increasingly quantum resistant. Aside from that, I see that we have, yes, this question about URLs. So let me just provide essentially our URL to our website, because this information is essentially contained. There are links to it on our website. So I invite you to go first there, and of course to get back to us via email for any further questions you may have. And our email is on our website, but I will also type it here in the chat so that you have it in clear and it's easy for you to copy paste it. Just one moment.
Yes, Stipend, actually, I think we're running out of time. So organizers have informed.
Thank you very much, and I believe we are done. For me, it's perfect, and I thank you so much for the opportunity again.
Yeah. Thank you very much for your excellent talk. So overall, I just thank both the speakers, Matthew and Stipend. I thank all the panelists, Dr. Anindita, Professor Brijesh, Professor Monica, Dr. Manjunath, Madam Reena. I thank all the support from TSDSI, Colonel Jaswal, Nivedita, Asif, Aditi, Bindu, the whole TSDSI Secretariat. Thanks to my CDOT team here for the logistics provided to me. Finally, I thank all the audience, and I hope you enjoyed the session. And we may not have been able to answer some of your questions because of lack of time. But definitely, I think we can do justice in a follow-up quantum session, because the subject is so vast, and I think we need a follow-up quantum session. So thanks TSDSI Secretariat, and thanks Rohit for coordinating with Stipend, and besides in spite of the technical glitch, we could make his session. Thank you very much. So audience, thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much.